Now, I've noticed in recent days you've come under fire on X, formerly Twitter, attacked by the left and the right. The left are enraged by your support of Israel and the West, and they've got segments of the right who are also very angry, Douglas, with you, and they're questioning if you can really be for free speech if you're part of a movement to what they say curb speech. Tell me about this emergency coalition against hate. Is there an inherent danger in trying to define hate and seeking to curb speech? And who gets to define hate?
These are all very good questions, Rita. No, I'm speaking in a couple of days in Canada at the launch of this new group. Canada has its own unique problems in free speech these days. And I think that it's extraordinary what has happened in that country. I spoke there a couple of years ago and made this point. I'll be making very similar points in a few days. My own view is, of course, as you know, that free speech is one of the most important bedrocks of our society. I don't think that it includes freedom to harass and freedom to intimidate and threaten and much more, which is what we have seen in the last number of months in Australia, in Canada, and Britain, and much more. I think that the outburst of anti-Semitism in the West in recent months has been documented now, is something that our society should be ashamed of. And I don't think we would have allowed it against any other group of people. I mean, if by now there had been repeated violence against, I don't know, Muslims, Black Brits or anyone else, LGBTQIA plus people, there would be an uproar, be front page every day. We would be having inquiries into it. The police would be hauled in. But that, for some reason, is not the case when we've had now months in the West of people calling for incitement against a minority, Jews. And I think that in that situation, we do have to be clear and think openly and speak openly about where the lines are between actual free speech and what is clearly incitement to violence and much more. I haven't changed any of my views, but I do notice as we go along this path, the number of people who get deranged along the path. I remain exactly where I have been on this.
So are you proposing new regulations or laws to tackle this issue?
No, it's not for me to propose new regulations. I would just say that in most countries, I particularly think of Britain and America, there are existing laws on incitement, which are very clear, actually. Yes. My view is that we don't need any more laws. We have incitement laws. It's just that they're not used. It's startling to me. You know, the British police the other day didn't act again against a bunch of anti-Semitic protesters, but did act incredibly fast against a very brave young Iranian man who held up a poster in the middle of their demo saying that Hamas is possibly a terrorist group. And my goodness, the crowd attacked that guy. And the police arrested that guy in no seconds flat. Now, that is insane.
It is, and that footage is shameful. I mean, he was holding up a sign condemning Hamas, and he was physically assaulted. They were throwing things at him. Multiple of the peaceful protesters were throwing things at him, and the police tackled him, not the people who were assaulting him. Again, it's not the first time we've seen that happen. On a different issue, in Australia at the moment, we are having unprecedented numbers of migrants coming into the country. We're told it's for the greater economic good. It's a message the Brits have had for many years, with authorities telling them, well, if you want to get your pensions, we need mass migration. How else are we going to afford your pensions? But there's multiple new reports coming out showing that, well, perhaps that's not the case. The Centre for Migration Control has a report out showing British taxpayers have spent £36 billion on jobless legal migrants and international students. And at the same time, the Brits are being told that thanks to an ageing population, they're going to have to retire later and possibly for a smaller pension too. It's all very interesting data, Douglas, in the lead up to an election.
It's damning, of course, for the Conservative government, who promised legal migration in the tens of thousands, which is what it was in the 1990s before Blair opened the gates. They promised to go back to the tens of thousands a year in net migration, and instead we're approaching a million last year in the UK. Of course, most of the people who come, because of the stupid laws that the Conservative Party have had in, instead of prioritizing high-skilled workers, they've prioritized low-skilled workers and students. So, of course, do not pay, particularly low-skilled workers, do not pay their way. They are a drain on the state. They take out more in benefits than they put in taxation, and almost certainly always will. As for the idea that that you need to import workers, you need to import migrants because of the people growing older and all this. I mean, the mad thing about this, as I pointed out for years, is migrants grow old as well. It's an astonishing fact that evades the politicians. And what that means is that you just have an ever-growing population that needs an ever larger migrant push from below in order to sustain the living standards of the aging population. I think it's a very, very inept set of policies we've had. I've written about them for years. I've explained for years why these policies are so wrong-headed. And I'm afraid it's a failure of mine and others. The governments didn't take notice. They didn't act on it. And so we have societal and economic consequences that are going to affect everyone's grandchildren.
It's akin to a pyramid scheme almost, isn't it? Where you just have to keep going, you keep needing to generate that economic activity to pay for the mistakes you've made in the past. Now, finally, I want to ask you about this. I saw this post on X go viral in recent days, highlighting the practice of Arab slavers castrating their male slaves. This shocked social media, but you've written about this in your book, The War on the West. It's incredible how so few of those who are obsessed with slavery and historic racial grievances are completely ignorant of the Arab slave trade and other examples of slavery around the world. How can that be? How can you be so preoccupied with slavery and then be completely ignorant about this?
Well, because they're not preoccupied about slavery, are they, Rita? They're preoccupied about being against the West. That's their simple drive. On issue after issue, whether it's colonialism or slavery or racism or anything else, these people just simply use these things as brickbats to hit the West with. It's no surprise that their so-called research stops at the edges of the West, because they're not interested in critiquing other societies. They're just interested in condemning the West. If people were genuinely interested in the history of slavery, they wouldn't be able to ignore the Arab slave trade, far larger trade than the European slave trade or the American slave trade. They wouldn't be able to ignore it, but they do, because they're not interested in slavery. They're simply interested in attacking Australia, Britain, America, Canada, and Europe. And that's their game. And we just have to see whether or not they get to win that game. I would hope not.
Douglas Murray, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time this evening.